Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're very honored to have with us today Bob Carlson, who is president of the American Bar Association, not just a section of the ABA, but the entire thing. So please join me in welcoming him to John Marshall.
Thank you. Thanks.
President Carlson has made attorney and law student wellness one of his priorities for his time as president. So we're going to spend time talking about that today and some initiatives that the ABA has going on. But at some point, we're going to open it up to your questions. So please think if you have questions for the ABA president. It's not always that we get someone of his stature to come over and see us. Before we get into the attorney wellness topics, I want to give him a chance to introduce himself to you, talk about his own law practice, and talk about what it is to be president of the American Bar Association. Bob?
Well, thanks, Dean. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. I am from Butte, Montana. Born and raised in Montana, went to undergrad and law school at the University of Montana. This is my 40th year out, so I get to give my the commencement speech at my law school on the 40th anniversary of my graduation. And I say that because 40 years ago, and some of my professors are coming back for it, and a couple of the people who became deans shortly after I left, because I think part of it's in amazement, because nobody thought 40 years ago, certainly not me, that I'd be sitting here talking to John Marshall Law School as the president of the American Bar Association. I practice in a small firm. So right now, this very moment, we have 4 lawyers. Probably by the end of next week, one of our young lawyers is moving to another town and going into public service. So we're going to be down to 3, including me. So it's going to be an interesting last few months as president. But that was part of the decision that was made a number of years ago to have somebody that represented the solo and small firm practitioners from around the country, of which there are many, and particularly in states like mine. Most ABA presidents historically have come from major metropolitan areas and major firms. But it is a big tent, and what we're doing at the ABA, what we've embarked on in the last few years, and what we're going to start beginning May 1st, is a new membership model. And that model is geared towards assisting new, younger lawyers and people in solo and small firms to succeed and give them the tools to succeed on frankly, a bandwidth that no other association can provide. I have a lot of respect in local bar associations, particularly the Chicago Bar Association and the Illinois Bar, and I was former president of the State Bar of Montana, so I have a lot of loyalty to state and local bars, and they provide a great deal of resources and assistance to their lawyers, and they provide a lot of collaborative and cooperative efforts to the ABA. One of them is lawyer well-being and lawyer wellness, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So first of all, nobody would have thought I was going to be the state bar president, but what I realized in the move up to that job was that I got introduced, I was a member of the ABA since law school, but I got introduced to people as part of leadership training that the ABA provides from all over the country, people that became very close friends of mine and those that are still with us are still close friends, not just them, but their families. So you became part of if you will, the fabric of their lives, and they became part of your life. And that's a critical point, because you never know what day, what time, what conversation you're going to have with somebody that is going to change completely the trajectory of your life. And whether it's becoming the president of the world's largest bar association, president of a state or local bar, leader of a firm, or get a decent case referral from somebody, or a decent client referral from somebody. You don't know how they're going to, those bits and pieces of conversations, both in law school and outside of law school. So the only way you're going to open yourself up to that possibility of having those conversations is to participate. You don't all have to try to do this. In fact, I would suggest that you just say yes to somebody who asks you to volunteer, because that's what I did. One yes. In 1987, I agreed to run for the State Bar Board of Trustees to succeed one of my senior partners who had been president of the bar and then had gone back on the board and was basically tired, needed to hand it over to somebody younger. Now, I didn't know exactly that day what I was saying yes to, and certainly that simple conversation, we didn't think it would translate into much beyond maybe someday being president of the State Bar. But this thing happened because a number of people, a number of conversations, a number of meetings, a number of relationships were formed over the course of 20-some years. And even then, I said, well, wait a second. I know lots of people, even from small firms, lots of people that are better at this than me. Why should I take you guys' suggestion? Why should I say yes to you on this? And I got an interesting answer, and it was try to be humble in this thing, and I've maintained, I think that's part of it, is that they basically said, we need somebody like you. Somebody from a place like Montana, somebody where people will listen to you, because we are going through some tough times, both in the profession and in the country and in the world at large. And we need leaders that come from different places so we can be diverse. The ABA's leadership is tremendously diverse, from the top right all the way through our sections. Our House of Delegates, which I was fortunate enough to chair a few years ago, is the policy-making body, and it's made up of lawyers from every state, minimum three from each state, and standing up in front of that crowd and looking out at those 600 people and the diversity of every kind and nature, from geography to firm practice type to firm size to gender to sexual orientation to race to ethnicity to religion. We have it all, and they get together twice a year and they decide what the policy of the association is, and it's only then. So if I say I can't answer one of your questions, it's because we don't have policy on it, or I can't bring a specific policy to mind. The president of this association only speaks on policy. I have no personal opinions this year. I sort of gave them up a few years ago, knowing I was going to get here, except for I do have a few favorite sports teams. I love my family, obviously, and our two dogs, and every now and then you'll catch me saying something about the weather. This has been a long winter, so with that, I hope that's...
Thank you very much. Attorney well-being has become a hot topic, both within the legal profession and law schools. Why do you think this issue has now come out of the dark? It used to be something that no one would talk about.
Well, Frank, I think it's come out of the dark because we have made, as an association, we have made it an issue. We worked with the Betty Ford Hazelton Foundation to do a survey of lawyers on issues with respect to wellness and from people dealing with substance abuse and addiction, people dealing with mental distress, anxiety disorder, suicidal ideation, suicide. And the results of that, well, in the back of our head, I think some of us weren't surprised, they were alarming. The significant percentage of the legal profession that suffers from all of those issues, greater than any other profession. And it's worse, if you look at the numbers of the people interviewed, it's worse in the category 30 and under. And it starts in law school. A very talented group of very smart people show up at the doors of law schools every year and work hard for 3 years, and they bring with them some of the averages in society when it comes to possibly being prone to addiction, or a family history, or some form of depression, anxiety, the imposter syndrome, a number of those things that people talk about that we never talked about when I was in law school. If you ask one of my classmates 40 years ago, first sentence that comes to mind about law school, number one answer, I survived. Number two answer, I hated it. You go a long ways before you find the one or two people that say I loved it.
And they're all teaching law school.
And they're all, yeah, they're deans. So, you know, we looked at it and it was a report. And what do you do with a report when you get a wake-up call? We got together with a number of other partners, with the Conference of Chief Justice, with law schools, with bar examiner folks, with the COLAP, Commission on Lawyer Assistance Programs, which were designed to help lawyers with addictions, and created a task force that was tasked to make something out of this survey, to provide some guidance, some guidelines, some tips about how we can fix this problem. And they came up with a toolkit that is, you know, we have put together, and it's 80 pages, and we've shrunk it down to a nutshell, 80 tips for lawyer well-being, and they run the gamut of, you know, exercise, you know, careful drinking, to mindfulness suggestions and that sort of thing. And we decided that, okay, we've got that group, but that sounds even more daunting. Let's create somebody that's even more nimble, a handful of talented people as a working group to study well-being, to work on, not just study it, but to come up with some more tips, and really invited a couple of key players to the table. That is the legal malpractice insurance carriers and the character and fitness commissions to make sure that we start moving the needle. The goal here, we always knew that there was an addiction problem. It happens in society. We had collabs that were designed on the 12-step program, or Alcoholics Anonymous, or to be quiet, confidential, kept somewhat secretive, and that still can happen. We want to respect people's privacies. But the only way you deal with something like this is be willing to get up in public and start talking about the problems. Hillary Bass, my predecessor, just before she became president, lost a friend of hers, a very talented Miami lawyer, very successful, on the eve of probably, I don't know how many millions of dollars the fee was going to be in this case, and committed suicide. Now, he had been struggling with depression, and he had been getting some treatment, but there's some dark clouds that you just can't get out of the way of. So that moved her. My story came from a little different place. I come from a very beautiful state. And on any given day, the state of Montana leads the country in suicide. And on any given day, my hard rock, Scrabble mining town that I grew up in, because we were all so tough, leads the state. And so we've lost colleagues in the Montana bar. I have lost, just celebrated the 20th anniversary of my brother-in-law's suicide. Lost a brother on the eve of becoming president of the association earlier last year. Neither one of those was a surprise. We sort of tried to do as much as we could with the one. My brother was a tough nut to crack, and just, you know, really had isolated himself. And so we've lost some other folks. And as a law firm in Montana, the drinking is a big deal. We've had partners that have dealt with addiction. So when you say to yourself, okay, we can't let this exercise become academic. This is not just a report that sits on a shelf, that we're going to talk about it every day. It's not the funnest thing to talk about, but if my reaction to talking about it ever changes, then I'll probably stop. So that's a different answer than you expected, but it is critical. It is. We've lost too many young lawyers. We've lost too many middle-aged lawyers. Losing anybody is not an answer. So we're going to try to provide assistance. It's not a be-all and an end-all, but we need to talk about it. We need to know and let law students and young lawyers and anybody that's struggling know that people are going through the same thing you are. And in society, it's pretty hard to say, oh, well, I'm struggling with this. And they look at you and they say, wow, wait a second, you're going to a great law school. You're a successful, wonderful student. You can't possibly be having issues, right? Well, you can and probably have more because of that personality. But we want to give you an outlet. And I know your school is doing a great job, frankly. A number of law schools are picking up this task. We believe that it went from a report to a movement. State and local bars are participating. We created a pledge for legal employers that includes law firms, government offices, in-house corporate law firms, and law schools. It's not perfect, but it's a first step about how you start looking at this issue and how you start creating a different culture of health. So it's a critical point, and we decided through conversations like this, we're going to come to law schools as many as we could last year and this year, and my successor, Judy Perry Martinez from New Orleans, is going to continue. We're going to work as hard as we can with as many people as we can to create a generation of healthy lawyers.
The pledge says, recognizing that high levels of problematic substance abuse and mental health distress present a significant challenge for the legal profession, and acknowledging that more can and should be done to improve the health and well-being of lawyers, we, the attorneys of fill in the blank, hereby pledge our support for this initiative campaign and will work to adopt and prioritize a 7-point framework for building a better future. Do you want to, and I will say, I didn't know that we had the pledge until preparing for this, but we will definitely sign on because we believe in what you're doing. We believe in the importance of this issue and the importance of every single person. We know that this is a stressful environment, that it can be a stressful profession, and that we need to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of our clients.
We think it's important. There's a number, I think we're over 80 some now that have signed the pledge, law firms, big and very small, and law schools, and it's not perfect. It's an evolving state. You're not graded on it. What we want to do is change the culture, change the discussion. Certainly, there are still going to be pressures in the practice of law. I mean, and in law school, we're not going to be able to get rid of that completely, but if you find ways to deal with them that are healthy and find ways to talk about when you're struggling with your friends or to get help that's offered either through law school or through a bar association, that's what you need to do. And you can't be afraid to say something about it. If you think about it, and I've thought about this a lot for 20 years, there really isn't a degree of separation between any of us and any one of those problems we've listed. There's not a degree of separation between you, your family, a relative, a colleague, a friend that has gone through that. And that should give you some sense, it's a scary thought, number one, but it should give you some sense of a community, of a hope that as you move into this profession, as the fabric literally of your communities, that you are going to be looked to solve their problems. But you can't do that unless you have your house in order. And there are ways to do it, and there are ways to take breaks from the day that even ABA presidents every now and then get to do some mindfulness stuff, which for a guy from Butte, Montana, trust me, even saying that is
So an issue that I've dealt with from being a law professor and now a law dean and trying to work with students who are facing different issues is the stigma of it. And they're particularly worried about if they go seek help, is that going to bite them when they're going through character and fitness and bar admission? Is that something that you've been able to work on? It's definitely gotten better during the 20 plus years I've been in the academy, but we haven't done the greatest job communicating that to students, and some states still put some problematic questions on their applications.
I think we made progress, and every day I think the more we talk about this, the more it becomes part of the cultures of those bar associations. We certainly have been talking about it a lot with the Conference of Chief Justices, and so the Chief Justices get together twice a year formally. The ABA officers, President and President-elect generally go. We invite the Chief of the Chiefs to speak at our mid-year meeting, and then the ABA President goes and talks about it. It's more than just a 40-minute set of remarks to a crowd. We're there for 2 or 3 days having dinner, breakfast, lunch with the chiefs from states all over the country. It's a big country and a lot of diversity in the different chiefs, but most are talking about this. And that's the start in every state, because most of the character and fitness derives its authority, commissions derive their authority from the Supreme Court. They're an arm of the Supreme Court who is responsible for admission to the bar in those states. So yeah, the questions are changing. Interestingly enough, I've been on Montana's Character and Fitness Commission since 1995. They're giving me a little bit of a sabbatical, but I can tell I'm 2/3 of the way through my year, because I just got an email to participate in an investigation. I'm like, well, I've still got 3 months. We have a program that we started 15-ish years ago called conditional admission, where we might ask some questions that people might think are a little harsh, both on behavior and have you had treatment, just to make sure that we ask you, do you still need help? Is there something going on in your life now that we can help you with? And does your doctor say that you need to be, if you're bipolar, manic depressive, do you need to be on medication? And what happens if you're not? And a number of those things trigger because of behavior that's reported, like assault, DUIs, sort of stuff that's a little out of the ordinary with this particular person's background, their transcripts, their grade point average, their life, and then all of a sudden there's this hiccup, and you want to find out what's causing that behavior. So if we think there's an issue, what we've done is create a conditional admission program. So we, as a commission, we enter into a contract with the prospective applicant that says for 2 years, you're going to do these things, whether it's you need to be an AA and have reports to us, you need to be on medication and your doctor has to report to us, but nobody knows about it but you and the commission. You get admitted, you practice law, the Supreme Court doesn't know about it, your clients don't know about it, you can tell them if you want, and we've done that with enough success that it's become sort of ingrained in our admission system. I've been thinking as we've gone through this process lately about, well, maybe we should take a further step and just change some of our questions to follow some of the lead of some of the other states. And once I get done with this full-time gig, I will probably start having that conversation with the chief and our chair. But it's a program that works pretty well for Montana, provides the protection that you need as somebody that's charged with protecting the public, but also protects the future of talented people who, maybe in another state they wouldn't have gotten that opportunity. But we are talking as much as we can, and we need your help. I mean, we need you, if you need help, to get help and not be afraid to do it, because a lot of the mechanisms that people use to treat depression, there's not a happy, if they're treating themselves, there's not a happy end to that. There just isn't. Whether it's alcohol or drugs, that's not the way to treat it. And certainly not self-medication. So we want to make sure that this movement really takes off, and some are going to be slower than others to take it up, but I think over time I think we'll succeed.
So I apologize for the little activity up here. You hear the sirens. There has been a derailment of the red line, I think near the Jackson stop. So that's what that is, and our security is working with the police to make sure that our community is safe. It looks like things are pretty well under control, but if you saw people moving around in odd directions, that's what's going on. One of the prongs of the ABA program deals with something that we've been having some pretty pointed conversations with on this campus. And what it says is, disrupt the status quo of drinking-based events, challenge the expectation that all events include alcohol, seek creative alternatives, ensure that there are always appealing non-alcoholic alternatives when alcohol is served. We've done some work around alcohol, some surveying. We have an alcohol policy that we implemented about 2 years ago that really changed when alcohol can be served. And a lot of the feedback we got is that this is the way that attorneys socialize. We need to develop sort of the professional skill of networking with alcohol present. Can you talk to us about that and where the ABA, if the ABA has any advice or your toolkit has any suggestions?
Well, I think the goal is to de-emphasize alcohol as the centerpiece of the event, and as you said, just to have options, and sometimes completely alcohol-free events to show people that you can actually socialize, network while doing that without drinking. There is a long culture, there's no question about it, and cultures are generational and change. But a number of our entities are either making it's a little more difficult to have alcohol, like cash bars, which will, but juice and water or other beverages might be free, or coffee bars instead of alcohol, or a mix of, yes, you can have alcohol at your reception, but you're also going to have a number of other alternatives for people who don't drink. And whether you have a problem or not, there's a number of people that my wife drinks very little. So if we go to a reception, my first job is to get her some water or, club soda or something like that. And so we've been trying to move that culture and to talk to law firms who have summer associate outings to try to, broaden the scope of those to make the activities less alcohol-centric and more activity-centric that might be beneficial to everybody. So I think the discussion, this is where it comes out of culture in law school. If you start changing the culture here, it will over time change. We're working on doing that as an association and making things, but we're probably not going to get to a point in the near future where we totally remove alcohol, because that's probably not the answer either, because it's handled in moderation, it's an appropriate thing to do. So, but we're definitely talking about it more. The pledge talks about it, the toolkit talks about it. Certainly, we used to, at my firm, we had a partner who went through treatment, and for the first several, firm meetings or dinners, we basically said, yeah, we're not going to tempt him, we're not going to put anything there. And then over time, it just went, okay, we're fine for a drink or two, but we never really had too many people that got too crazy. It's a pretty small group of people. So you notice if somebody was, acting up a little bit, So
you've had an opportunity to travel to other law schools and talk about wellness. What are some of the things you're hearing from law students on other campuses?
Well, first of all, some surprised that we're talking about this like we do, and it's been very well received. A number of schools that we've been to so far have started wellness and well-being programs, mindfulness programs. Some are very advanced. I think yours is pretty advanced along the way, but it helps to just talk about it. And the conversation, whether it's with law students or with our younger lawyers, you can see people in the audience with the light going off in their head thinking, okay, I'm feeling like this. And I'm glad now that somebody's saying something about it. I've talked to students and young lawyers who have attempted suicide. This is not a panacea. This will not fix that, but they have gotten help. They're working on it, but it's a dark cloud sometimes. The one thing that I think everybody in this room needs to know, and the one message we try to deliver, even though you sometimes think that you're alone, that the clouds are too dark, that you're really not worth it. You have support in the faculty here, you have support from the administration, you have support from the world's largest professional association, and you have friends that you can talk to. And what we need to do is say, if you have that cloud that's really pressing down that you just don't think, you need to make a call. You need to figure out a plan in advance of that happening and have somebody that you can talk to. And if we do nothing other than deliver that message that you all matter, you matter a great deal, certainly to your school, certainly to each other, certainly to your family, but definitely to the American Bar Association, then that's what we want to deliver.
Are there any questions from the audience at this point?
You can ask it on any topic. It doesn't have to
I
be
think
well-being.
Peggy has a mic. We have a question here in the middle.
I'm not exactly sure if you'd want to address this, but I imagine you having been a student yourself, you experienced stress in law school. And I'm just wondering if you can remember anything that really helped you deal with that stress that you could think of.
So during law school, one of the reasons nobody thought I would be here is I managed to organize all of the intramural sports leagues and teams, played some club sports while I was in law school, so continued to do something from an exercise or athletic to burn off stress. I lived mostly with people that were mostly at the start fifth-year seniors because they all went to school on athletic scholarships, swimming or track, or in one football scholarship. So it was quite a mix, most of them from smaller towns around Montana. So I maintained that outside friendship. But I had some really close friends in law school that are, still pretty close, that whenever things got, we used to talk it out. And we had a student in our first year that just after finals. Now this was a guy that, and the story is a happy ending, but this was a guy who was a Naval Academy graduate, flew high aerial reconnaissance missions over Vietnam for 2 years with a camera and a sidearm. And probably in the top 5 easy of, I think he ended up graduating 3rd in the class. And he was going bonkers after finals. Like I flunked out, and I'm just thinking, I hope I get 1A. I mean, I hope I just get all C's, I don't care. And we're all looking at him like, guy, come on. So what's the deal? And so we spent quite a bit of time that in the break, because I was working, and he stayed in Missoula with just talking things out. And every time I would think, well, if Eric's, what do I have to worry about? Number one, I'm not gonna stress out, because if he's stressing out, well, my goodness. But to have those conversations about, working through that with him as things moved on, and he ultimately became a very successful lawyer. And but there was a close moment there, and frankly, I think his wife saved him, because she saw something and invited a bunch of us, because I liked Eric, but he was sort of abrupt and abrasive, and maybe if I sat on a plane for 2 years by myself, I'd be a little abrupt and abrasive too, and with a number of my classmates. But she managed to get everybody, about 20 of us there, and for this thing. So Part of it is just having a release, something that you feel passionate about. It could be volunteering at an animal shelter, volunteering to read, to go back to your high school, to go to a grade school and hang out with the students, something that you feel passionate about that's separate from law, that gives you that release. This is tough stuff. There's no sugarcoating it. This is tough stuff, but you guys are pretty bright, or you wouldn't be here. So you got to think, you got to keep that as your sort of central guiding force, that you are bright and you belong here and you belong being lawyers. And so taking a little bit of time off to go for a walk around the block or to, work standing up. I'm not at my office very much these days, but I have a desk that stands up, goes up and down. But from standing up at my desk, it forces me to move around more, forces you to breathe more, forces you to pay attention more. And so little things like that you're going to have to use as tricks throughout your career. But really, a walk around the block is the best medicine when it all seems to, oh, this is crazy. Get out and get some fresh air. Talk to some of your friends. The one thing you can't do is think that you're the only one that's feeling like that, because everybody's feeling like it. Doesn't matter if they're the first or the last in the class. Everybody's feeling like that.
Hi. What advice do you have to the people who are confident in their abilities while functioning under the influence of alcohol or drugs? Those who still perform high, but they're under the influence of some sort.
Well, first of all, I'd get help, because if you think that either enhances your performance or that you could continue to do that for very long, you're not going to be able to. There are certain people that might do that. There's a great, I can't remember the author's name, a woman walked out of a bar. This was a true story. A woman highly functioning in a major law firm, was drunk all the time, but still performing at a great level. Finally realized she needed help, decided part of this process of treatment was to write a book, wrote a book, and then only then did she, when it was going to get published, and I think the ABA published it, that you go in and tell her partners, and they were all shocked. So you can fool people for a while, but she was on the edge of not being with us. So I would read that book, and it's a wake-up call. You can't, alcohol does not improve your performance, period. If you participate in any type of sports, it might make you relaxed, it might make you be able to be more social, but it's still not the answer. It doesn't improve your performance, and it really is, frankly, it's a violation of the rules of professional conduct, because to provide legal advice when you're under the influence is not a good way to go. And so you really, it's a myth, and it's got bad consequences. It may be a while, some people can do it for a while, but you never win on that.
And if I could jump in, Cody, two things. Thank you for the question. I think that's a great question. I mean, many of you are young and your bodies are tolerating it now, but one of my best friends in the world had a serious alcohol problem, and he has destroyed vital organs and probably cut a decade, if not more, off of his life. So that's something to think about. And the other thing to remember is that it's not about you when you're a lawyer, and think about your clients. Some of you probably have been watching the HBO series on Adnan Syed. That was also the topic of a lot of podcasts. Now, his lawyer had some other impairments, but impairments she had, to the point where probably Adnan and other people were convicted and are still in jail because she could not do the job that she needed to do for those clients. So I think thinking about it beyond yourself is important as well. Other questions? Do we have the mic up here, Peggy?
Have you considered the special needs of the neurodiverse community we're at greater risk of anxiety and depression and addiction problems.
So considered in what way?
Well, for example, I'm autistic. It took me more than 30 years to get up the courage to come to law school. And it's hard to develop a social support network when you're neurodiverse. And just because of our chemistry, we're more at risk of mental disorder.
I don't know that it's in any of our publications, but I know there's discussions that are going on across all of the cognitive and mental issues that might affect the general population and therefore the lawyer population, to try to figure out ways to encourage people who know they have a particular diagnosis to seek appropriate treatment and to give, as long as they're capable of getting through law school, passing the bar, then to try to give them some sort of resources to help them become a practitioner that's successful and that can be a productive member of society. I mean, that's our overall goal. We don't pre-screen anybody. We are looking at this from an issue across the board, whether it's alcohol or depression or everywhere in between. We're trying to say there is a place to help you. You have a place in the legal profession, and we want to make sure that you reach the fullest of your potential. As far as something specifically directed, I don't think so. Right now, we're trying to create a broad brush that includes everybody, and then hopefully over time work on specific deals. But there are treatment facilities, treatment options and assistant options for every spectrum of everything we're talking about. And if you need to have some sort of counseling or treatment to practice law, to be a lawyer, to be comfortable being a lawyer or being in law school, we're trying to make suggestions about how you can go there and get that help and not be penalized down the road when you seek admission. I mean, that's the overall goal, trying to find a way to help everybody be more healthy.
There's a question on this side.
Hello, well, thank you for joining us. But given the stigma still surrounding mental health and all of the even addressing and seeking out help, how would you recommend someone bringing it up? Who would you bring it up to if one of your classmates is struggling or going through something? How do you recommend bringing it up in a way that's both empathetic but addresses the needs and the concerns you have?
Well, it's a sort of a different approach if you're friends with the person than it is if you're strangers. If you're a stranger and you see somebody, and let's say you go to a student event and there's always this same person that's hanging out around the edges and doesn't ever seem to be talking. The best way to figure out what's going on with that person is to walk up to them and ask them what their story is. Not you talking to them, not you, but what's your story? What do you like? Get them talking about things to try to figure out, are they just shy or is there something else going on? The discussion, if you really think a friend is having a problem, then you need to, particularly if somebody's, has suicidal thoughts, you can't, it's not your responsibility necessarily, but what I suggest people do is, figure out what's going on. Do you need help? We're friends. You can share this. You're not alone. We're all struggling. What's the situation? And then look for serious signs of, giving away possessions, not seeming to care about appearance, strange eating habits, stuff like that, which then try to figure out a way to get them some help. You're not, unless you're a trained psychologist or clinical psychologist, a law student's got enough on their plate, but try to get them in touch or try to at least make a comment to one of the counselors, one of the faculty, somebody you trust that's going to keep that confidence, and will be able to figure out a way to approach the person. We can't, you're not going to win everyone. You're just not. And it's a long, sort of road from saying, if I would just have done this differently, or if I wouldn't have been, at an ABA meeting in Nashville, Tennessee, and would have been home, or, but you can't, that's not you. Some demons are too much. So you got to know that you reached out and tried to do something. You can't always fix somebody. And they have to be willing, and it's a struggle, it's a daily struggle. They have to be willing to participate. But on the other hand, you just can't not say something. There's a lot of things that a lot of times we think, oh, we just can't. It's not my place. It's not. Well, certain things, they're just really looking for somebody to ask. And if you don't feel comfortable, point out the signs and tell somebody that's qualified to at least give it some thought and make a decision.
And I'll just add on from our space here, we have something called a student support and emergency team, and that's led by Dean Pope and some other administrators. So you can always give her a heads up, and they know the resources. We know the resources in our own community. We also have the counseling center here, and they have drop-by hours, and there's an emergency number. Some other things, I love Bob's advice of just asking people what their story is, but if it is someone you're close with and you realize they're struggling, to the extent that you can stay with them a little longer and be with them so they don't have to be alone. Also, and I've had to do this, you can get them to the emergency room and you could call 911. If you think that it's imminent, it's better to make a mistake in that direction, right? I think we're all hesitant to presume what's going on in someone's head or to do something that you think might hurt their career, but better for them to be alive the next day and maybe mad at you than for it not to happen. When I was associate dean at Stetson, I had one of the scariest moments of my career. I'd just become associate dean. We weren't talking about a lot of these issues back in 2000. A student came into my office and said, I think my roommate's in trouble. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something to the effect of, can you get him to come see me tomorrow, or can you get him to come to call me? Before that could happen, he made a suicide attempt. After that, whenever I learned of something like that, I tried to intervene almost immediately. It wasn't like wait another hour, wait till the next day, have someone who's in distress take the affirmative action. I've learned to try to take that affirmative step myself.
Regarding the issue of reporting drug abuse now or suicide or depression now and it coming in conflict later with the Character and Fitness Commission, you spoke that it's ingrained in the process for use of discretion, but is there any guarantee policy that protects students now from reporting from having adverse action against them in the future? And is there any guarantee that you see that couldn't be reversed in the future if there is any protection set up now for it?
That's sort of a tough question to answer because it's a state-to-state thing in terms of what each individual state's Character and Fitness Commission is looking for and what the actions. Hopefully, from our perspective, this process will continue to evolve so that the questions that are asked in a way to elicit information that allows you to say, look at the whole person and, okay, they recognize they had a problem, they got help. That's what we want. I mean, I've done this in Montana for a long time. I want somebody to say, I had a problem, recognize that, and I got help. I think they're going to be a great lawyer. I think that recognition that because frankly, that translates to every part of your life, whether you have a process or not. I mean, the willingness to ask, the willingness to say, I don't know everything, and I tried to look I don't have the answer, whether it's work or life, family, dating, health. That's a critical component to a judgment of being a good lawyer. And so when I see that in analyzing people I'd much rather see that than somebody who does not put in something that we're going to find out, because we get all the records. So we err on the side of telling it everything. But even if somebody has had a hiccup in their life and they've realized that it was being caused by something and they got help for that problem, those are the people we want to look to, at least in Montana. I can't speak for any of the other states, and the ABA, the states, the ABA is a very strong supporter of the state control of admission to practice, and of the state Supreme Courts controlling practice in their jurisdictions. But we're working to hopefully over time to make those questions fairer in terms of if you see that red flag, it's not an automatic no. It's what did the person do? And if the concern is I've asked for help, hopefully, first of all, you might want to apply for admission in Montana. And there's a number of states that are joining that same thing. They really think that the people who are asking for help and getting help are going to be the ones that recognize as they go through life and are the ones they want in the practice of law in their states. I think that's why we're trying to create this idea that it's better to get that help and forget about the consequences. If you need help, practice of law, there will be a place for you if you get the help. If you need the help, don't be afraid to get it, and certainly don't be afraid to report it.
A few other things is don't presume what the questions are. Look them up. I think people imagine what the questions are instead of knowing. Most of the questions are not going to ask you anything remotely like, have you ever suffered from anxiety or depression and sought counseling, or have you ever gone to therapy? Those are not the questions that are on the exam. And that's probably the issues that most people in our environment are going to deal with most regularly is, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, and go to counseling. So know the questions. The second thing is what I'm seeing and what we as a law school tend to report is conduct. We don't diagnose things. And so what I tend to see happen is people with untreated problems, and they're acting out. And that's what I have to report, because we get questions like, is the person honest? Does the person meet obligations? So if you're missing appointments and acting unprofessionally, that edges us closer to a no on some of those. So know the questions, know that what they're seeking is, are you going to be a danger to your clients? Are you able to act in a fiduciary capacity on behalf of someone else? And that most of the issues in a student environment, not all by any stretch of the word, but a lot of them aren't even going to come up. So don't let that scare you away from getting help. And I think what Bob said is right. I mean, if you do have a serious problem, if you've been dealing with alcoholism, if you have a serious mental disorder that impacts your conduct, but it can be controlled in different ways, show that you're dealing with the issue. Because states do have conditional programs as well. So if you've been able to show a pattern of dealing with these and acting responsibly, they're more likely to either admit you outright or to admit you conditionally so you can get that license and start practicing. Avoiding it's never the issue. Well, we're almost at time, Bob. Do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share with the students?
Just, you do matter, and you have to keep that in mind every day. We all have things that go on in our lives. We all have distractions. We all have moments, in law school is tough, but you can survive well, not just survive. You can do this well. You can be a lawyer, deal with the stress, be healthy, and be productive citizens. That's what we're looking for. We hope that you'll join us when you get done with law school and become a member of the American Bar Association. We are starting a brand new membership program that's providing significantly more benefits at a fixed price for the first 0 through 4 years out at $75. The benefits that we're giving you for that membership far exceed that price. And it gives you an opportunity, besides your local bars, to spread your wings and see the talent that's around this country and the talent that practices law and that gives back to not only their communities but their profession. We need more young people every day. We're living in interesting times, and we need a very strong National Bar Association to speak out for an independent judiciary and to speak out on behalf of the legal profession to protect the institutions of justice. And the only way we can do that is if you join us and become future leaders in this profession. So thanks for your time.
Thank
Glad
you.
to be here. Good luck.
And just one final thing to our students. You're in such an enviable position vis-a-vis most of the law students because the American Bar Association is based right here in Chicago. The annual meeting is held here every other summer. You don't have to travel to it. And there are amazing student leadership opportunities. I got involved in the ABA when I was a young lawyer. Someone said, maybe you should go do this one project. And it's allowed me to meet people all over the country. So I feel like I know people in every state. You know, that 6 degrees of separation becomes more like 3, and it can really benefit your career. So I encourage you, if you haven't been paying attention to what the ABA is and what it has to offer, to get involved. And I'm sure Bob would stay around and answer some specific questions if you have them. Thank you very much.
Thanks.